I'm Maggie. It's lovely to have Maggie Dent with us today. How are you, Maggie?
Oh, look, I'm really good. And thank you for inviting me to have a chat, Kate. We kind of go back a long way. It's good to see you again.
Yes, lovely. I'm really enjoying your book. You can see with all the notes, Parental As Anything.
That's what I love. I love it. See when there's post-it notes in.
Yes, to go back to.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to absorb it all. So this is based on your podcast with the ABC, Parental As Anything, I believe.
Yes, that's correct. And when ABC Books came and said, how about we write a book, I took a bit of convincing because I thought the podcast there, and you can just go back and listen. But then I realized one day when I was listening to a podcast, which I found fascinating and thought I'd remember the key points, can't remember if it was Brené Brown or Glennon Doyle, something really powerful, which you should remember, it had just gone straight through. So I figured there is so many golden nuggets that those beautiful people gave that I felt, no, it's right, because then we can just go, hang on, I didn't have a fussy eater last time, or gosh, the last child never asked me what sex is at 5. And that's what I felt. If it can be that sort of guide that you can just go, hang on a minute, I need some common sense with just enough of the science, with a bit of humor, I hope. Yep, okay, we've got this, because it's not telling parents how to do things, Kate. It's very much reassuring you that I'll give you the information, and then you look in your home, your family, who you're co-parenting with your values, and then you make the decision, not these people out there who write about it. Then that includes me.
And we can do this.
Yeah, that's it. Yes.
I'm going to, it is. It's nothing like having a book too. And I think we all learn and retain information differently too. I mean, some things great orally, but other things need to see as well.
Yeah. And I think also, if you write a book, which I've obviously written lots of them, you write on one kind of theme. Whereas if you're raising children at different ages, different genders, different neurodiversities, there's a whole lot of things that you'd have to go and get out of lots of other books, which is kind of what we're aiming for in the podcast. We take parenting dilemmas and find really significant, worthwhile people who know what they're talking about. So I can chat to them and ask them the questions that I think most parents would like to ask. And my key thing every now and then when I'm looking at something is, would that have been helpful when I was in those trenches? And if I felt that was it, then it went in, and it's in the podcast as well.
And what I really like about this is it's very modern. I mean, you've got a chapter on solo parenting, which I appreciate, and co-parenting, equally appreciate. I didn't read anything when we separated 7.5 years ago on that. And in that time, there wasn't a lot around that was practical, some highfalutin sorts of things, but not just everyday, this is normal, it's common. You didn't want to be a minority then, so you'd rather not read about it.
Exactly. And also I think there's that tentativeness that if I pick up a parenting book, is it going to make me feel worse? And that's one of the things that I'm really mindful of. I never, ever want to, create more guilt for families, because I mucked up so many times, Kate, seriously. And
I find that very hard to believe, Maggie.
No, I've done all of them, and, slammed their fingers in a car door and then went, what did you do that for? I've forgotten their lunch boxes. I failed one of the biggest fails today, and it wasn't quite the Olympic sport it is now, but I forgot Book Week. Now, why that's a double fail is because I'm a high school English teacher by origin. So what we do at Book Week is encourage reading. And here I am completely failed, put some T-shirts on, drew something on it. The boys all said it sucked. And of course, I actually taught in the same college as where my boys were going. So it was like a double fail for me. And of course, I have friends who probably still remind me of how badly I failed. And I think that's one of the things that they wanted the book to say, that you don't have to be a perfect parent, and there is no such thing. That, you know what, the good enough, that you aim to get it as right as you can, but there are going to be days everything goes to muck. And I own up to the days that we had porridge or toasted sandwiches for dinner with no broccoli at all and nowhere in sight, because there's nothing left in my tank. And that was before we could do online shopping. I had to go to a real shop to buy the food. So at the end of the day, you can raise really good enough kids from good enough parents who fail sometimes, or fairly often.
And I like that, the 80-20 rule, which I hadn't come across that before either.
And every now and then you just
80%.
go, this is a 20% day. You know, it's a 20% day that we're going to eat more junk food when we should. We're going to eat sugar and we're going to do everything that's not okay because it's a 20% day. And I need to go to survival. And when I get out of bed tomorrow, I'm going to have a much better go at all the things that I know matter that I'm trying to do. But I think that's one of the things, Kate, I've noticed. Parents are judged so much, and I'm not sure if it's just that we've got a social media platform, but compare and despair. We couldn't see what everyone else was doing when I was raising my boy. I couldn't see what everyone on the other side of the world was doing. And so I didn't feel pressured that my boys,
and inadequate.
That's it.
Really?
Inadequate, failing, not good enough. And then that runs, particularly for mummies, our compare despair. And the person we compare and despair about ourselves is us, which is why sometimes we're still awake, aren't we, at 2 o'clock going, gosh, I didn't do that well enough. And they didn't eat broccoli today. And when do they have a shower? And that's not helpful for us because we don't get as much sleep as we need. And we get up with that inner bias playing out instead of, I want parents every now and then to sit down in amongst the chaos and go, this is all right now. This is going good.
Enjoy the moments.
Kids are all playing, I've got this. And that's it. I want you to start looking at what's going well, at the funny moments, the light moments, the loving moments, rather than keep focusing the lens on the things that we wish we could do better.
I noticed that in your chapter on discipline. Now, discipline's one of those things that I know myself, I haven't had a great deal of clarity on the right way to discipline. I know you support a lot of Vanessa Lapointe's work. We've interviewed her previously too. She does fantastic work on discipline and punishment. And would you like to talk about that, Maggie? Because it's such a big topic. And I mean, how are we being kind, loving, but still keeping boundaries?
Look, it's such a big one, Kate, and I think it's one of those challenging areas that, if I go back to my parents, particularly my mum, well, it was really, if you got compliance by scaring the heck out of us or hitting us or shouting at us, because that's what it was believed. If you punish children when they do what you don't want, you will get them to do what you do want. Well, in actual fact, that only worked on rats. So and even that, I mean, I did Psych 101 at university and we had to train a rat to do that. And I came in on the 3rd week and mine was dead, upside down, legs in the air. And I realized a part of me didn't believe that train, that rewards, which is great because it's handy, because that's actually what, the science of child development will now show, is that you might stop a behavior, but are you teaching them what you want them to do? And that's the core difference between punishment and discipline. Discipline says my job is to teach my children what I'd like them to do and what is okay, which is about boundaries. And that there are times I'm going to step up, which is, I love it, that term from swagger, which is Dr. Vanessa's, because of course she's Canadian. We do step in with swagger and say, no, you are not going to do that right now. And you'll put those away right now and you will use a voice, right? But the difference is we don't hit them. We don't shame them. We don't exclude them. We're firm. And then once that's done, we remember that connection is actually a really powerful thing that increases our children's potential to do what we want them to do. We're more likely to do the things that people want us to do with people who are kind and loving. So it is the fun, the firm, the fair. Yep. And it's keeping that balance. And that's why some days on 2 hours sleep, it's really hard to do that, with a prefrontal lobe, because we've got one. And I think the other thing is that there's a difference in how we discipline our roosters and our lambs, Kate.
I was reading a lot about that in your first chapter. I was going to ask you.
Because lambs are such sensitive, kind of gentle souls. They actually don't want to push up against boundaries. They're quite happy to do what you ask. They just don't stress about. Whereas you get these little roosters, and they can be girls and boys, they land on the planet with a heightened sense of their own importance, and they've got energy. They really want to be respected, even though they're little tiny people. They argue about your parenting before you can believe it. They have so much energy. They don't want to share nothing. They want to win everything. And those attributes, we want them, some of them in our children. but they're the ones that we can get into power struggles with. But they are also the ones we have to be firmest when holding those boundaries, because if we let them get away with it, then they feel they've got more power over us. And having a power challenge with a rooster means that probably, one, they're not feeling as connected as they need to be, because honest to goodness, you're growling at them all the time. They're all, especially if they're boys, like, seriously, what are you doing jumping on your brother from the top bunk? That's not okay. No, it wasn't funny. That's not funny when you do it. You know, those sorts, you're on and on. So what they feel sometimes is less loved. But, you know, they're kind of asking for it at some other level. So it's a really difficult one. So the bottom line is, the more that we put moments of connection and love into those feisty roosters, again, in those heated moments, recognizing, how can I respect that they think they're as important as me, which is about agency, right? So this is what's going on right now. And I want to know how we can work out, how can we make this better? Or what do you think would work? So we look to them as though they're 14 or 15, no, actually probably 25, and actually ask them their view of how we could deal with things. And I can tell you, particularly with girls, they are so sharp and intelligent at coming with solutions. So every now and then we might be doing too much in parenting, thinking I have to solve every problem, fix everything. Every now and then I want us to step back and go, gosh, you two siblings have been fighting for a while. Is there a really big problem where you're just annoying each other and want some time out? And then see if they can work it out, because we just get sick of people sometimes. We do that in our workplace when we're in workplaces. You know, we do that with our partner. You know, so of course it's going to happen with our kids. So rather than punish them for not getting on, or punish them for not finishing a meal, or punish them for shouting because they're actually overloaded, their nervous system's overloaded, what we got to do is kind of step back and go, what's happening for my child? And how can I help them meet that need? Yep. And that's really the challenge, is what their number one need is, Kate, is a safe base, seriously a safe base. And for that, that can vary, can't it? On some days it's really easy, and other days it's just not so easy, depending on what's happening for us.
And I really like how you talk about the differences between tantrums and meltdowns. You know, identifying tantrum, trying to assert a sense of self, meltdown, sensory overload, because obviously then the ways of coping with it, trying to calm it, are different, aren't they? Would you like to talk about that, Maggie?
Yeah, and I think parents and educators don't realise they're doing this all the time. I call it being a CSI detective. You're kind of tuning into how they're doing all the time, which is why, you know, if your child starts to get really ratty, you know, particularly if you're trying to have a coffee at a coffee shop. So for me, I just didn't do it till they were over 20. But when I take my grandies, I realise we've got about 15 minutes and that's it, they're done. And so I usually get a takeaway one, because I recognise that quite often you can't get served in that space. So I've recognised they can struggle to hold energy in a public space, whether it's too noisy or it takes too long, or they're hungry, or they've got a poo that's due if it's a boy. You just don't know what the unmet need is, because that's enough to tip a boy over. And then we're watching them all the time, which is why we, you know, take a snack with us in case they get starving. It's why every now and then we give them more hugs and cuddles, because we know they're getting a bit ratty, right? So you're actually tuning in all the time to recognizing unmet needs, but it's really challenging sometimes. So the tantrum, usually that has come from an outside stimuli. You know, like I said, it's that, no, you're not having a biscuit before dinner. And no, we do have to go home now and whatever. And I don't want to. And so again, that can trigger the flooding of cortisol. But the meltdown, which is what Dr. Mona Delahook, I explain in the book, it's a bottom-up meltdown in the brain, which means the brain floods with cortisol, just like in a tantrum, but nothing has really triggered it in that moment. Their nervous system has just got into a completely flooded state for a whole lot of reasons. And of course, you know, being a sensitive child and people invade their space, that can be enough. A child who doesn't like loud noises. Now, it took me years, Kate, to realise I'm actually sound sensitive.
You are.
Really took me years. And I was a high school teacher, so there's a lot of noise. But what I found is
and
when
for
I'm
boys.
Yeah, 4 boys as well. Fortunately, they were outdoor boys, or maybe I just locked them out there. I've recognized it's when I want to go and do something that I want to enjoy that's peaceful, like go out for a meal or a cuppa. If the restaurant's got doot, doot, doot music, or it's really noisy, my nervous system just drains and I get exhausted and I have to actually leave. And when we were in America at one point with my good man,
So you've devoted the book to?
Yes, I did devote it. He's put up with me and he allows me to do all sorts of crazy things that he probably wouldn't want me to be. I wouldn't have done it on my own. And we're in New York, and even the big, giant billboardy flashing things, I kept thinking, oh, gee, it's pretty big, isn't it? But it was when we went into a cafe, a big one, and there were TV screens all the way around on different channels with the sound up. And then there were really loud American voices. And I said to Steph, I actually feel nauseous. I got to get out of here. I got up to leave, and 2 of the waiters came over with really big raised American voices. I nearly vomited on them. Now, what I didn't realize is that's what happens to our children when the sensory systems overload and when it just floods, and we're not doing anything wrong as a parent, because children are gradually growing in their capacity to manage their world, and their prefrontal hasn't grown, and they're going to get better at what we call regulation. And that's the kind of thing, again, the biggest message I think that's come from, the shift in parenting is that our children, we don't shut down those moments, because that stuff's got to come out of the body, which is what kicking and screaming is. It discharges cortisol. I don't know about you, but if I'm really flooded with cortisol, my voice gets quite loud. So again, yes, and of course that's us, and we have a prefrontal lobe. So the really important thing to remember is, rather than shut it down, because that's what would have probably happened to most parents today, stop that, I'll give you something to cry about, go to your room till you calm down, we were actually doing things
together.
Yeah, we were escalating it instead of co-regulating, which is, I can be a safe space while they discharge that. And don't we know what happens after they've had a good kick and a scream? The serotonin floods back in naturally, and they're quite, aren't they? They're lovely then. And I think the hardest part is in the supermarket, when that happens and you'll get what I call Skippy response, as though that child needs a good smack. You'll get some of those, don't you? And every now and then I can find now, you'll get a wink from a mum giving you a thumbs up going, it's okay. We've all been there. I get it. Hang in there. And I think we're shifting in that way as our knowledge of children's capacity to regulate their big feelings. We are definitely heading in the right direction. And it's the same for our tweens and teens. We've got to recognize that for them, it's almost like on steroids, because everything grows to an even more heightened state. And the same thing applies, that, trying to shut them down or growl at them when they're in a flooded state, it just escalates it and makes them feel even more disconnected and more useless and more crazy, whatever they're running a story about. So it's important that, when we get that understanding from when they're younger, you tend to manage it better later, realizing it's not that you may be failing, it's that your child is not bad or naughty. They're just not coping with their world right now.
And that helps us to have compassion and patience, doesn't it? I really liked that, those words of advice. And I also, as an extension of that, really liked how you said, what if it's too late? What if my daughter's now 13 and I'm reading some of these things? Oh my God, I wish I knew this when she was a toddler, and incorporating some of the way I was parented in those early years, and there's regret and thinking, gosh, I wish I'd approached it differently. I mean, and what do you recommend then?
Oh, look, there's such good news. Thank goodness we know so much more about how the brain works. And so what we know is that all of our experiences get encoded into memory. And if we have another memory that is different, it can often weaken the negative memory. So that's one of the things. So if we all thought, I was never hugged as a child, and then a parent makes that awareness later and wants to be able to say, look, there's something I wish I'd known, and this is what I'd like to do differently. And if that child allows that, then that other story can just weaken. But the second one is that neural pathways in the brain. That's actually where everything is, all our learned experiences. And so when we change the way that we speak with a softer voice, we don't do the shouty as much, or we do the, gosh, how can I help you? You look like you're having a tough time, instead of shouting at them, they go, and before you know it, you've actually rebuilt what we call attachment. So what children need is they want you to be their safe, big grown up, and they can feel that at later in life. And I've actually been at workshops where I've seen 25-year-olds reconnect to a parent in a workshop, because they just have to say, look, I'm sorry, I didn't know that's how I was parented, and I wish I could go back and change it. And hearing those words and hearing, I'm sorry because it's caused you pain, I want to be the parent you want to be. Oh my gosh, it dissolves all of that stuff. And sometimes we need to know that it's never, ever too late. And sometimes it's a letter. If it's a boy, it's better with a letter, because they can't handle too many big words and can't handle too much. They need to read it about 8 times, so think of a mum letter, or or a dad
That's
letter.
interesting advice for boys, though. I didn't know that.
No, totally. It's one of the things I write about in From Boys to Men, that sometimes when you want to have a big conversation with your son about something you're worried about, if you start talking to him about that, he'll get defensive and block any information that you give, and will not take any of it on board.
I've
And
noticed.
that's exactly what they'll do.
I know, Mum. I don't want to talk about it, Mum.
Yep. So we write a letter, and it's got to be a feedback sandwich with an opening sentence that says, I love you more than all that, the stars in the night sky, whatever it is, I love you more than my own life. Now, there's some things I want to be able to, I'm concerned and worried about, and I want you to read this, and I want you to read it a couple of times. You don't have to come and talk to me about it. I just need to share it with you. So what I'm noticing is that you're speaking really abruptly to your sister. And I am really concerned, because she absolutely loves and adores you. And I know you love her. So I'm not sure why you're doing that. And I'm not even sure you might know you're doing it. So these are the words I've heard you say that I'm concerned about. So if you can think of some other way of expressing your frustration with her sometimes, because girls can be really frustrating. Yep, because that's what's going on, right? He's just using language you would prefer not to use. And secondly, I've just noticed, you've stopped using your manners around home, and you used to be fantastically polite. And I can tell you that manners are actually really something that people notice later in life when they notice you. And I want you to be the sort of boy that grows into a man that people want to be near and respect. And then at the end of it, you go down. So I just want you to give some thought and think about it. Remember, you do not have to talk to me about this. And remember, I just think you are the most beautiful boy on our earth. I love you more than anything, Mum. And that's it. You do not talk about it, which is not easy for us, because we want to check in and see how it went down. Now, I only ever needed to write mum letters to my 2 rooster boys, Kate. So isn't that funny?
Interesting.
Yeah, because
so with the other boys, was it because they just didn't misbehave, or was it because you could actually speak with them?
Yeah, I could just say, hey, that's not a good word to use, and they'd take it on board. Whereas if you're trying to challenge a rooster who thinks he knows everything, he's going to refuse it and see that as you pushing him away, and who do you think you are? What's really funny, Kate, is my 2 rooster boys who fought like cat and dog. Seriously, it was, they ended up at university. They lived in Perth in the same house, 3 boys going to uni. And then
3 of your boys, or 3?
No, 3 of my boys.
3 of your boys, yeah.
Yep. And then the oldest one graduated and went to Sydney. And then when the next rooster graduated, of course, because Perth was too small, because you've got to go to a big city because he's a rooster. They lived together, like Dumb and Dumber. And one day I sent a letter with some raffle tickets. And apparently they were together when they got the letter out, and they both looked at each other and went, oh, I'm not opening that. I'm not opening that. They would, neither of them opened it. It was the first time that either of them had recognised they both have had mum letters. And
they thought it was just them.
I thought it was a mum letter coming. You see, what was funny is I rang a few days later and said, you got the tickets? And they said, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, I sent tickets in them. I went, oh, we thought it was a mum letter. We're not even opening it. And I laughed. So again, there are times that can work better in terms of communication. And I think our job, isn't it, at times as parents, is how do I be the teacher and the guide
of that child?
Yes, of each child, which may need quite different way of me approaching it, that one size fits all doesn't fit. And that's the, really big message I think I leave in the last pages of the book. Every child is a one-off.
I like that.
It's just one. There
is no guide for your child.
No
so
guide.
We're all in the same boat.
Written the book for your child, and that you, the parent, are still the person who knows them the best. Yeah, and that's why you're the one. Because sometimes, Kate, I was getting emails from people saying Melbourne saying, which school shall I send my son to, Maggie? And I didn't know your son, didn't know Melbourne, didn't know what schools are available, but that's kind of what can happen if we surrender. What I say is
knowing.
Yeah, our own inner knowing. And there is a gut instinct in us parents, both dads and mums. And that's why sometimes having that conversation about what is right for my child right now, because sometimes changing a school is the right decision, or giving them more time before they start is the right decision, but it might not be one that other people agree with. And sometimes if you have a child who's neurodivergent and you want to advocate slightly different things and other people don't agree, you have to stand strong to be, the champion for your child.
Yeah, because everyone's got an opinion. I really liked how you referred to the 5 languages of love without identifying how to parent our child individually too. I've never thought of it as far as children goes. I've thought of it in romantic relationships.
No, it's very similar. And I had that experience early on. I remember when the book landed in my lap because, that helped me identify what was happening with the marriage I was in at the time. And when I looked at it, I had gone away for an education conference and come back. And the 3 oldest, it was really funny. So the one who's a quality timer was literally 2 inches behind me saying, so Mum, how many people were on the plane? What food did you eat on the plane? And when you got there, what was the hotel? And how many people were at the conference? And what? He just wanted me to fill in every gap because he's a quality timer, right? And now the safe touch, he just hung onto my leg. I had to drag him all over the place while I was trying to cook dinner because he was trying to fill up that cup of safe touch. And the one that's not a safe toucher and not a quality timer, he kind of likes you to acknowledge him, and he kind of likes acts of service, and he and also gifts. And he kind of walked in and said, "What's for dinner? And did you get me anything?" and it's really interesting because sometimes what we tend to do as a parent is give what fills our love cup,
what we
to
like,
our children,
right,
and assume it's filling theirs. But and that's one of the metaphors I use in mothering our boys. Just ask your boy, how's his love cup filling? Because he will tell you if it feels full or if it's got poo in it. And he will let you know how. And you can say, so what else can I do that helps? And then you can get a guide to what you put in there. So why would you be putting in, a version of a love cup that doesn't fill it? And again, it's what's so fascinating.
To our children, they need. Maggie, one topic that you do talk about, which is the bane of my life with a 10-year-old boy who's addicted to computer games and a daughter who's on her phone constantly, is screen time, digital world. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. How do we manage it? How much is too much? And I really like, sorry, just on that you did say that gaming was a particular concern with boys. Now, I didn't know that. I thought it was just my son. And I was funny that he's more addicted and said he's more interested than my daughter. Okay,
and let me go to a couple of the common sense things. What we actually do know is that we have to prepare our children to live in a digital world. So abstinence and complete denial forever isn't going to support them. And that also using your digital devices as a form of bribery or control doesn't always work either, because then they won't come to you if they see some awful stuff online, because they'll think you'll take their iPad off them. So the other thing that really big message from Dr. Christy Goodwin was, you need to be the pilot of the digital plane. At no point do you let your children take control, because they're still children. Even your 16-year-old hasn't got a very good prefrontal at night and can make really, really poor decisions.
Sorry to interject here. I just read in your book too that the brain keeps developing till we're 25.
Oh, easy. So roughly 22 to 23 for girls. It's tending to be quite mature. And interesting, Kate, it was 25 for boys, and there's a whole lot of reasons why. I have read some more recent research because of the online activity that boys are doing. It delays the prefrontal lobe development, which means they're now not developing a mature prefrontal lobe till closer to 30, 28 months. So let's go back to what's going on. So the first 5 years, as little handheld devices as possible, because it inhibits movement, it inhibits play, it inhibits the senses engaging with the universe. They need to be outside because it helps their eyes. We've got increased myopia. So there's a really, really clear thing. And I don't put TVs in the screen box because to me, they've been around for ages. And also, if you want to get away from your children 5 minutes to have a wee in peace or a poo in peace, put them in front of Bluey. It's not going to cause any harm at all. Just avoid TV programs with advertisements that advertise, the things that we don't want our kids to be attached to. And secondly, the smart TVs, because they know how to get onto things on smart TV. So in other words, you need to disable those things or make sure they can't access it. You can, trust me, because if you've got, often girls will keep playing while the TV's on. Boys will keep doing somersaults. So they're not stuck. It's the fixed notion of the tablet or iPad that's a problem. Now, they need it for school. So the priority is that there are different uses that we have for technology. So we prioritize the things that are educational, and we talk to them about recreation or entertainment. And that sort of thing is, it's becoming a little problematic, Kate, and exactly putting your finger on it. What we're finding is that some of the games that are targeted for our children from 4 to 6 are actually built in with reward systems, which means that they're getting used to being rewarded. And that means we're creating a whole generation of gamblers.
And dopamine? Is that what you mean by rewarding?
Yeah, you keep on rewarding them, so they want more and more rewards, which is exactly. So for our boys, they're biologically wired to be like a mammoth hunter. So they're wired to take risks and run and be adventurous. They want to have
shoot things.
Shoot things. That's exactly what that's why they, make guns out of toast when they're 4. So what happened with the gaming world? It just created the virtual reality of what boys love to do. And before you know it, and it's not all bad, Kate, and that's what, one of the chapters that's not in there, but it's in the podcast. I talked to, Brad Marshall about when does it get problematic and what do we do? But also there are some incredibly good things that can happen. Some of our boys who have social anxiety or are on the spectrum can develop social skills and feel belonging in groups. And also Minecraft can be incredibly creative. I mean, some schools use a version of that. So we know it's not all bad, and that's a big message. What is it about how much time? The key trick around that one is, are they able to do their homework and maintain physical activity in the real world? And if they're not in lockdown, are they hanging out with real kids doing the stuff that kids are meant to do? Because sitting still can actually build up that cortisol in the body, and actually it's not healthy for boys. They need to discharge that with physicality. So we're worried that that's creating a lot of angry boys, or a bit more anger in our boys. But when they're also gaming, they get into a zone and they become the character. So every now and then you'll hear language that you really wish you hadn't heard from your son. And because they're immersed in the game, they might do that racing around on them, on their BMX bike or on their skateboard, but you wouldn't have heard it. So and there's one other problem that teachers are telling me is that sometimes that character swaggers into school the next day, still the boy that won the game, and all this stuff's coming out that wouldn't have come out before. So they're the issues. So that's why we need to negotiate with them a rough time frame that they're able to have those things, because it seriously is socially engaging. 2 is time frame. Make sure it's not just so you've got an hour. If your homework's all done, you've done your chores, guess what? But you don't get that till your chores are done and your homework's done. That's called boundaries.
Yes.
And then say it's roughly an hour. If they get their chores done early, they get a bit longer, right? And then know that they can't always stop at exactly the minute because they're halfway through a level. So we come in a couple of times and we do what we call cognitive priming.
That's good advice, actually, to that consideration.
Yeah, we come in and do cognitive priming. So just remember the next level, it's time to get off, and run in, rub his back and say, it's not long now. I'm going to watch you do the last part. So we go into their world and just kind of, instead of yelling from the kitchen and screaming and get off, which escalates everything. And then what can they do next? It's another thing that Christy says, I've got a snack in the kitchen for you is going to get your boy off more quickly than if you just say it's time to do your chores, right? So cognitive priming, we've just got to learn those things. And then I think our biggest challenge for today's parents is the harmful kind of content they can see and the harmful behaviour. So I think our challenge is, how do we educate? It takes a lot of time and energy to raise responsible, respectful digital citizens. And we cannot let them just run around on that digital highway the same as we don't let them run away on a main highway. And a couple of the tips that I have in the book too is that at different times, because settings and privacy settings are one of those things, and letting them know how they can tell if someone is the age they say they are, because there's a lot of sexual grooming happening online. Play really dumb as a parent, and maybe change your settings on your WhatsApp or your Snapchat and just say, can you tell me if this is okay? Because I don't want to get stalked by some creep. Can you check mine? And so as they're checking that, you're reminding them to check their own, and you're reminding them that that's important. And then the second big one, when you're using your phone, tell them when it is for important things like booking doctor's appointments, and I'm just ordering the food, and I'm just on the WhatsApp app to see what time your football game is or your netball game or what's going on at school, because that's exactly why we can't disappear out of that world, because this is how things are organized now. And they need to know, this is me, not me. If you see me on my phone, do not assume I'm scrolling through Insta.
Yes.
Right? But if I decide to, then I'm going to have to put a parameter around it. And I do know that the families that have decided now that there's an end point to the Wi-Fi, because it ensures a good sleep,
yes,
they're the ones that are getting the best kind of out of both worlds, because the kids have to work out how to get their homework done to be able to have enough time to muck around and do whatever they want to do before the 10 o'clock bedtime if they're high school, or 9 o'clock, and everything's off. So mum and dad's Wi-Fi is off too, because I've had, when I was working with the boys, I'd say, why don't you get off and go and have a cup of Milo or hot chocolate with your folks? And they look at me and say, because they're not there, Maggie. Dad's gaming in the bedroom and mum's watching Netflix on the couch. They're not there. They're not in the kitchen anymore. They've gone. That's a biggie. So we have to look at, is this the first generation that could experience digital abandonment?
Yeah, because it's easy. I mean,
so it's
addictive to us too. Ping, 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 ping.
Ping, ping. Turn your alerts off and hide your phone when your children are around. That's two really golden tips that we know. If you can't see it, you're less likely to pick it up.
And I think it was in your book, I read no devices in the bedroom. Was it?
Yeah.
You said that, Maggie?
I think
I've heard that recently.
Yeah, no, it's definitely one of the things that all the experts and the E-Safety Commission recommend, because what happens is you will lose control of what they're doing. You will not know what they're doing. So what we know is that there's in a common area, especially as they're getting into the tween and teen years, they're so much less likely to watch pornography or take a nude photograph of themselves if they're in the lounge room.
Yes.
And also, if there's a drama going on that's building up behind the scenes and you can see they're getting upset, you are able to step in and support them. But if you don't know that's going on and it happens for an hour, that has been a trigger for some of our young people to end their lives. So we actually need them in our warmth space. And it's not easy, because some of them are already in there, and some people have games rooms set up, don't they, with massive screens.
Or the phone, the mobile, it's so small and it's so, and which brings me to the topic of pornography. And also you've got a chapter on talking to our children about the birds and the bees. Do we need to discuss that? Really? Can't we avoid it? Can't the internet educate them? So, and you recommend we do talk to them about pornography, about realistic, just trying to find the wording here, but
totally
untruths, the untruths about pornography. And, how do we talk to them about the birds and the bees, Maggie?
Okay, so the very first thing is that it's a bit like talking to them about death. You don't just have one conversation. So we need to have small conversations, particularly from when they're young, around their body ownership and permission to touch their body, particularly their private parts, because that's not something we really ever had conversations around. And we're now starting to recognise that consent becomes a very big thing later in life.
What age should we be doing this, Maggie?
Look, I think before they're heading off to school for sure, definitely. Because we've had, and this will make you cringe, but we've had around a 500% increase in inappropriate sexual play with children under 5. Because these children are accidentally sometimes stumbling on pornography, or an older sibling showing it to them. Children are naturally wired to do what they see.
Yes.
It's their modeling instinct. So sometimes it's also child to child molestation, which we have to call it that because that's what it is, even though it's kind of starts with an innocent space. The second one is sibling to sibling. And I've had some desperate messages from parents who've stumbled upon this. Because if that's what they've seen, and you'll see this on YouTube, you'll see it on TikTok. In other words, the apps that they access to find fun stuff sometimes has really dark content. So you need to have a conversation that says, while you're stumbling around on that digital highway, if you see photographs or videos that make you feel uncomfortable and a bit sick, come and tell me. Yeah, I won't growl at you. I need you to know where they are so we can have a conversation about how to keep you safer. Every parental control that you can possibly have on your every device, because we have to do everything we can because the sickos are just putting it everywhere. So our kids have their innocence stolen, Kate, and we can't leave our head in the sand. There are parents who say, oh no, that won't happen to my child. And I can tell you now, on a school bus, in a school ground at lunchtime, that's exactly what's happening. And we need to prepare them that if that happens, I need to talk to you about what happens when people become sexually intimate. It's not just intercourse. You know, there is so many other things that we need to talk about as well. And I think we just can't leave it to chance anymore. But I've got great news, because there are some absolutely fabulous, more modern versions of books about puberty that have been done, you know, so beautifully. Kath Hankinson, who I talk about in the book, she's got a fabulous one. And Michelle Mitchell's created some fabulous ones that are interactive, really fun, funny.
Well, are they
funny.
books or online?
Yeah, they are books. And I think they've got online versions of things as well. And what it is, it makes it easier for the kids to not feel cringy about it because they keep laughing at the funny stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of addresses the questions that kids would like to ask their parents. And I think one of the best golden nuggets that Kath gave us, she used to work as a sex therapist before she became a sex ed educator. She said, if a child comes to you and says, so what does this mean? And you want to cringe, keep this in mind. You say, tell me what you know first.
I wrote that down. Tell me what you know about.
Yes. And because I don't know if you've heard that funny kind of joke where the young boy runs out and says, Daddy, what's sex? And so Daddy gives him the whole full version of the whole intercourse, the babies and eggs and, you know, whatever. And Dad said, so why did you want to ask? And he said, well, Mum said that run out and tell your dad that dinner's ready in a few secs. And that's exactly what we could do. We could overdo it. So it's about age-appropriate information. And what's beautiful is that there are resources now that can give you what to say at 5, what to say at 10, what to say at 14. And that's really, but you have to step forward and find those things. And that's one of the things.
Avoid it. Hope it goes away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's again, it's almost tougher to be a parent because you said at the beginning, how do we, you know, all these things that we need to teach our kids, what is the internet teaching them? So we've almost got to unlearn some of the unhelpful things in order to be able to teach our kids what our values and what we feel is morally correct or morally right within our code of decency, because it seems that they've been desensitized, don't they? You know, really. And we do need to talk to them about the fact that pornography can make you think things that are not true. And that it is demeaning. And it is often have violence towards women and girls. And until we recorrect that, I'm worried that as we step into intimate relationships with either, you know, gender, that we're going to be struggling with a perception that you need to choke people or hit them in order to enjoy sexual joy.
The way people are supposed to be, their bodies supposed to look.
Absolutely. We've got to talk about those things. You can't just pretend that the school's done sex ed, tick, tick.
No.
It's
No.
when we watch movies with them and say, oh, did he check in that she was keen for this? Because that's what consent is. I didn't hear a yes. Did you hear a yes?
Mm.
And we over and over and over, and they'll go, oh, don't embarrass me.
Yes,
Yep,
have the
keep
conversations.
Keep
And I
going.
like how you put in the book too, you know, the importance of modeling safe, respectful, warm relationships in our home. You know, to not devalue that, actually.
Oh,
How they learn.
heavens above. It's such a because kids, we reckon originally it used to be about 92% of what children learn is based on modeling, which is terrifying, but apparently it's gone up, which is kind of why they learn stuff online. You know, they're modeling what they see. So we need to make sure that we've stepped up around how do we speak to people when we're not happy with them? How do we argue without being disrespectful? Because conflict is normal. That's not a sign that you're bad and you're right and I'm wrong. It's the fact that we disagree, and disagreeing is actually what humans do. But we don't hit each other, punch each other, shout at each other, slam doors in each other's face. We actually really try and see if we can calm down and come back and have another conversation about it. What are we modeling? Are we modeling good manners around home? Do we say, excuse me, please? Or do we just command and demand? You know, at the end of the day, I really want us to look at how we communicate with our children, because I tend to find that we speak differently to our children than we do to people we love, you know, like your best friend. And one example I used at a conference once was, if you're out with coffee with your friends, particularly a bunch of girls, and a friend has a booger hanging out of a nose, we don't reach over and go, oh, that's disgusting, let me wipe that off. No, we probably go, oh, nostril, left nostril, you know, and we'll be really, you know, you know what I mean? And then I think,
Yes.
but who do we love more than anything in the world? It's our children. So I really want us to think, am I speaking to them in a way that is respectful and based on love? Or am I coming from an older version of how parents need to be, which is always this, you know, quite often growly, grumpy person who's trying to make you be a better human.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for your time, Maggie. Great book. Really recommend it. Lots and lots of helpful information. We haven't even skimmed the surface, really. There's a lot more in there, which, highlighted, and I need to go and read more.
And I think one of the deceptively powerful chapters is the one exploring death and loss, because, of course, it's another one of the areas we hope someone else will deal with. And when I wrote it and revisited the podcast, it was I must admit that one really still had tears in my eyes, listening to Maddie Cross's story of losing her 18-month-old son to meningococcal, and how it really impacts a parent to lose a child so young, and that we can learn from that. That what can help. So again, I'm just so grateful for all the beautiful people who came and played with me, and also the ABC for trusting me, because really there was a part of me as a kid on a farm that I always wanted to be an ABC news reader. So a podcast is really the closest thing.
Yes.
So thank you. Thanks for your time and all your good work.
Thanks, Maggie.